Oak trees are some of the most important and successful trees on Earth. When most people think about oaks, they usually picture strength, age, stability, or those huge spreading canopies that seem to dominate an entire landscape. But oak trees are much more complex than most people realize. They are not just one kind of tree. Oaks are a massive group of species that evolved over millions of years across different climates and environments. And one of the biggest reasons they've been so successful is because they are incredibly adaptable. Oak trees belong to the genus Quercus, which is part of the beech family called Fagaceae. Worldwide, there are somewhere between 400 and 500 recognized oak species, depending on how botanists classify them. Oaks are found mostly throughout the Northern Hemisphere, especially in North America, Europe, and Asia. Some of the greatest oak diversity in the world exists in Mexico and the western United States, and California is one of the most important oak regions in North America because so many different species occur there. One of the first things to understand about oaks is that they are considered a keystone species. That means entire ecosystems depend on them. A mature oak tree can support hundreds, sometimes even thousands of living organisms, including birds, insects, fungi, mammals, lichens, mosses, and soil organisms. Oak ecosystems are some of the richest biological systems in temperate climates. Acorns feed wildlife. Cavities in trunks and branches provide nesting habitat. Dead wood supports fungi and insects. Their roots stabilize soil and influence how water moves through the landscape. In other words, an oak tree is not just a tree, it's an entire living system. Biologically, oaks are usually divided into major evolutionary groups, and in North America, the two biggest groups are white oaks and red oaks. White oaks generally have rounded leaf lobes without bristle tips, and their acorns mature in one growing season. Their wood also tends to be dense and resistant to rot. Red oaks usually have pointed lobes with tiny bristle tips, and their acorns take 2 growing seasons to mature. Red oaks often grow faster, but under certain conditions, they can also be more susceptible to decay. Another reason this distinction matters is because oak wood has been incredibly important throughout human history. Oak wood is strong, dense, durable, and visually attractive, which made it valuable long before modern construction materials existed. White oak, in particular, is highly resistant to moisture and decay because its wood contains structures called tyloses that block water movement through the wood pores. This made white oak ideal for shipbuilding, barrels, outdoor construction, and structural timber. In fact, many whiskey and wine barrels are still made from white oak today because the wood not only resists leaking, but also affects flavor as liquids age inside the barrel. Red oak is also widely used commercially, especially for furniture, flooring, cabinetry, trim work, and interior woodworking. It tends to grow faster and is easier to machine and shape, although it is generally less resistant to moisture than white oak. Even today, oak remains one of the most widely used hardwoods in the world. Oak is commonly used for furniture, hardwood flooring, cabinets, staircases, doors, tables, beams, tool handles, veneers, and decorative woodworking. Part of the reason people value oak furniture is because the grain patterns are attractive and the wood is extremely durable. A well-built oak table or cabinet can last for generations. Historically, oak was also critical for railroad ties, barns, wagons, bridges, ships, and early infrastructure because of its strength and long-term durability. This distinction between white oaks and red oaks also matters biologically because species within the same evolutionary group are more likely to hybridize with one another. Oaks hybridize far more easily than many other trees. Scientists have discovered that oak species are genetically connected in ways that are actually unusual for trees. Different oak species can exchange genes with one another while still remaining separate species overall. This is one reason oak identification can become difficult in the field. Oaks are constantly adapting, exchanging genetic traits, and producing intermediate forms. Sometimes, you may look at an oak tree and realize it does not perfectly match the characteristics of a single species. That's because oak evolution is still very active and dynamic. Visually, oak trees vary enormously. Some are evergreen and stay green year-round, while others are deciduous and lose their leaves in winter. Some have massive, deeply lobed leaves, while others have small, leathery leaves with spiny edges. Bark can range from smooth and silver gray to thick, dark, and deeply furrowed. Growth forms vary too. Some oaks grow tall and upright, while others spread outward into broad canopies. Some species stay shrubby in harsh environments, but become massive trees under better conditions. Oak trees are wind-pollinated. They produce male flowers called catkins, and smaller female flowers that eventually develop into acorns. Because they rely heavily on wind rather than insects for pollination, oak pollen can travel across large distances, allowing widespread genetic exchange between populations. Their root systems are another major reason for their success. Young oaks often establish strong taproots early in life, especially in dry environments. Later, they develop extensive lateral root systems that help them compete for water and survive drought conditions. California oaks especially are known for developing root systems adapted to long dry summers and highly seasonal rainfall. Oak growth rates vary depending on species and environment. Some grow relatively quickly, while others are slower growing and invest more energy into structural strength and long-term survival. Many oak trees can live several hundred years, and under favorable conditions, some species may survive over 1,000 years. Another important concept with oaks is something called mast years. Oaks do not produce the same number of acorns every year. Instead, they periodically produce massive acorn crops all at once. This is called masting. Scientists believe this evolved as a survival strategy. When enormous numbers of acorns are produced at the same time, predators cannot consume them all, allowing more seedlings to survive and regenerate the next generation of trees. Now, when we narrow into California specifically, oak ecology becomes even more fascinating. California's climate created ideal conditions for oak diversification. The state contains enormous environmental variation, including coastal fog zones, dry inland valleys, foothills, mountain systems, Mediterranean climates, drought cycles, and fire-driven ecosystems. Oaks adapt differently to all of these environments, which is why California contains such a wide variety of oak species. One of the most famous California species is the valley oak. Valley oaks are the giants of California oak systems. They can exceed 100 feet in height and develop massive trunks with broad spreading canopies. Their deeply lobed deciduous leaves and enormous branch architecture make them visually distinctive. These trees are commonly associated with California's Central Valley and riparian systems where soils are deep and water availability is higher. Then there's coast live oak, which is one of the most recognizable trees throughout coastal California. Unlike valley oak, coast live oak is evergreen. It keeps its leaves year-round and develops dense, twisting branch structures with leathery dark green leaves that often have spiny edges. Coast live oaks are highly adapted to drought and coastal environments, including the influence of coastal fog. Interior live oak is somewhat similar but occurs farther inland, where conditions are hotter and drier. It has dense evergreen foliage and tremendous drought tolerance. This species becomes especially important later when discussing hybridization. California black oak belongs to the red oak lineage. It is deciduous and has large lobed leaves with pointed bristled tips. Black oaks are ecologically important because they produce large acorns that historically served as major food sources for indigenous people throughout California. They are also more fire adapted than many people realize and often regenerate effectively after disturbance. Blue oak is another remarkable California species because of its drought adaptations. Its blue-gray leaves help produce water loss and reflect sunlight. Blue oaks often grow in dry foothill environments where few large trees can survive successfully. They may appear sparse or open-grown, but they are extremely resilient trees. Canyon live oak is one of the most variable California oaks. In some locations, it appears shrubby and compact, while in protected mountain environments, it can become a massive tree. Its leaves often have golden undersides, and the species can tolerate a wide range of elevations and growing conditions. One thing that makes California oaks particularly interesting is how often hybridization occurs. Because multiple species overlap geographically, they naturally exchange genes with one another. This creates intermediate forms that may contain characteristics from both parent species. One famous example is the oracle oak. The oracle oak is a naturally occurring hybrid between California black oak and interior live oak. Botanists originally believed it was its own distinct species because it displayed characteristics that didn't perfectly match either parent tree. Later, research showed it was actually a hybrid. What makes the oracle oak fascinating is that it displays intermediate traits between a deciduous black oak and an evergreen live oak. Some leaves resemble black oak leaves with lobing, while others are more leathery and persistent like live oak leaves. Some oracle oaks behave almost semi-evergreen, retaining foliage longer than black oak, but not permanently like true live oaks. It's an excellent example of how fluid oak evolution can be. And this leads into one of the biggest lessons about oaks overall. Oak species are not always rigid categories. Oaks are constantly adapting to environmental pressure. Hybridization allows them to exchange beneficial traits related to drought tolerance, temperature adaptation, disease resistance, and environmental survival. Oak ecosystems also evolved alongside fire. In California, especially, low-intensity fire historically shaped oak woodlands for thousands of years. Many oak species developed thick bark, resprouting ability, or structural adaptations that help them survive periodic burns. Indigenous people actively managed oak landscapes with cultural burning practices long before modern fire suppression policies existed. Today, however, many oak systems face serious stressors. Sudden oak death, caused by the pathogen Phytophthora ramorum, has heavily impacted coast live oak and tan oak systems in California. Drought stress weakens trees and makes them more vulnerable to insects and disease. Bark beetles, borers, root pathogens, and fungal decay organisms can all affect oak health, especially when trees are environmentally stressed. Another challenge with oaks is identification. Because oaks hybridize so frequently and respond differently to environmental conditions, identifying species is not always simple. Two trees of the same species can look dramatically different depending on water availability, sunlight exposure, soil conditions, competition, or disturbance history. Even experienced arborists and botanists sometimes disagree on oak identification in hybrid zones. Culturally, oaks are deeply important as well. California indigenous tribes relied heavily on acorns as staple food sources for thousands of years. Acorns were carefully processed to remove tannins and converted into flour and meal. Oak woodlands were actively managed landscapes, not untouched wilderness. Human interaction with oak ecosystems shaped California landscapes long before modern forestry existed. At the end of the day, understanding oak trees means understanding relationships. Oaks are connected by climate, fire, soil, water, wildlife, fungi, insects, and human history. They are not static organisms. They are adaptive systems shaped by evolution and environmental pressure over enormous periods of time. And maybe the most important thing to understand about oaks is this: no two oaks are ever truly identical. Their structure, growth, behavior, and survival strategies are all responses to genetics interacting with the environment around them. That's why oak ecology is so complex, and also why oak trees remain one of the most important and fascinating trees in the world.